the primeval priests assumed power when Eternals spurned back his religion and gave him a place in the north, obscure, shadowy,
assumed power
void,
when
solitary,
spurned back his
Eternals,
religion
and hear your call gladly, dictate swift
shadowy
words, and fear not
solitary,
to unfold your dark visions of
I
torment.
hear your call gladly. Dictate swift-winged
I
words,
hear your
and fear
call
not
gladly
to unfold your dark
dictate
visions of
swift-winged
torment.
words, and fear not of the primeval priest assumed power when Eternals spurned back his religion and gave him a place in the north, obscure, shadowy, void, solitary. Eternals, I hear your call gladly, dictate swift-winged words, and fear not to unfold your dark visions of torment. Lo, a shadow of horror is risen in eternity. Unknown, unprolific, self-closed, all-repelling. What demon hath formed this abominable void, this soul-shuddering vacuum? Some said it is Urizen, but unknown, abstracted, brooding secret, the dark power hid. Times on times he divided and measured space by space in his ninefold darkness, unseen, unknown. Changes appeared in his desolate mountains, rifted furious by the black winds of perturbation, for he strove in battles dire, in unseen conflictions, with shapes bred from his forsaken wilderness, of beast, bird, fish, serpent, and element, combustion, blast, vapor, and cloud. Dark, revolving in silent activity, unseen in tormenting passions, an activity unknown and horrible, a self-contemplating shadow, in enormous labors occupied. But Eternals beheld his vast forests. Age on ages he lay, closed, unknown, brooding, shut in the deep, all a void, the petrific, abominable chaos. His cold horrors silent, dark Urizen prepared, his 10,000s of thunders ranged in gloomed array, stretch out across the dread world, and the rolling of wheels, as of swelling seas, sound in his clouds. In his hills of stored snows, in his mountains of hail and ice, voices of terror are heard, like thunders of autumn when the cloud blazes over the harvests. Earth was not, nor globes of attraction. The will of the immortal expanded or contracted his all-flexible senses. Death was not, but eternal life sprung. The sound of a trumpet, the heavens awoke, and vast clouds of blood rolled round the dim rocks of Urizen, so named that solitary one in immense city. Shrill the trumpet, and myriads of eternity muster around the bleak deserts, now filled with clouds, darkness, and waters that rolled perplexed, laboring, and uttered words articulate, bursting in thunders that rolled from the tops of his mountains. From the depths of dark solitude, from the eternal abode in my holiness, hidden, set apart in my stern counsels, reserved for the days of futurity, I have sought for a joy without pain, for a solid without fluctuation. Why will you die, O Eternals? Why live in unquenchable burnings? First I fought with the fire, consumed inwards into a deep world within, a void immense, wild, dark and deep, where nothing was, nature's wide womb. And self-balanced, stretched o'er the void, I alone, even I, the wind's merciless bound, but condensing in torrents they fall and fall. Strong I repelled the vast waves, and arose on the waters, a wide world of solid obstruction. Here alone I, in books formed of metals, have written the secrets of wisdom, the secrets of dark contemplation, by fightings and conflicts dire, with terrible monsters, sin-bred, which the bosoms of all inhabit, 7 deadly sins of the soul. Lo, I unfold my darkness, and on this rock place with strong hand the book of eternal brass, written in my solitude, laws of peace, of love, of unity, of pity, compassion, forgiveness. Let each choose one habitation, his ancient, infinite mansion, one command, one joy, one desire, one curse, one weight, one measure, one king, one God, one law. The voice ended. They saw his pale visage emerge from the darkness, his hand on the rock of eternity unclasping the book of brass. Rage seized the strong. Rage, fury, intense indignation in cataracts of fire, blood and gall, in whirlwinds of sulphurous smoke and enormous forms of energy. All the 7 deadly sins of the soul in living creations appeared in the flames of eternal fury. Sundering, darkening, thundering, rent away with a terrible crash, eternity rolled wide apart. Wide asunder rolling, mountainous all around, departing, 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 leaving ruinous fragments of life, hanging frowning cliffs, and all between an ocean of voidness unfathomable. The roaring fires ran o'er the heavens in whirlwinds and cataracts of blood, and o'er the dark deserts of Urizen fires pour through the void on all sides on Urizen's self-begotten armies. But no light from the fires, all was darkness in the flames of eternal fury. In fierce anguish and quenchless flames, to the deserts and rocks he ran raging to hide, but he could not. Combining, he dug mountains and hills in vast strength. He piled them in incessant labor, in howlings and pangs and fierce madness, long periods in burning fires, laboring till hoary and age broke and aged, in despair and the shadows of death. And a roof, vast, petrific, around on all sides he framed like a womb, where thousands of rivers in veins of blood pour down the mountains to cool the eternal fires beating without from eternals. And like a black globe, viewed by sons of eternity, standing on the shore of the infinite ocean, like a human heart, struggling and beating, the vast world of Urizen appeared, and Los, round the dark globe of Urizen, kept watch for eternals, to confine the obscure separation alone. For eternity stood wide apart, as the stars are apart from the earth. Los wept, howling around the dark demon and cursing his lot, for in anguish Urizen was rent from his side, and a fathomless void for his feet, and intense fires for his dwelling. But Urizen laid in a stony sleep, unorganized, rent from eternity. The Eternals said, "What is this? Death. Urizen is a clod of clay." Los howled in a dismal stupor, groaning, gnashing, groaning, till the wrenching apart was healed. But the wrenching of Urizen healed not. Cold, featureless, flesh or clay, rifted with direful changes, he lay in a dreamless night, till Los roused his fires, affrighted at the formless, unmeasurable death.
Los, smitten with astonishment, frightened at the hurtling bones, and at the surging, sulphureous, perturbed immortal, mad raging, in whirlwinds of pitch and niter, round the furious limbs of Los. And Los formed nets and gins, and through the nets round about he watched in shuddering fear the dark changes, and bound every change with rivets of iron and brass. And these were the changes of Urizen. Ages on ages rolled over him. In stony sleep, ages rolled over him, like a dark waste, stretching, changeable. By earthquakes riven, belching sullen fires, on ages rolled ages in ghastly, sick torment, around him in whirlwinds of darkness. The eternal prophet howled, beating still on his rivets of iron, pouring solder of iron, dividing the horrible night into watches. Urizen, so his eternal name, his prolific delight obscured more and more in dark secrecy, hiding in surging sulphureous fluid his fantasies. The eternal prophet heaved the dark bellows, and turned restless the tongs, and the hammer incessant beat, forging chains, new and new, numbering with links hours, days, and years. The eternal mind, bounded, began to roll eddies of wrath, ceaseless, round and round. And the sulphurous foam, surging thick, settled, a lake, bright and shining clear, white as the snow on the mountains cold. Forgetfulness, dumbness, necessity, in chains of the mind locked up like fetters of ice, shrinking together, disorganized, rent from eternity, Los beat on his fetters of iron and heated his furnaces and poured iron solder and solder of brass. Restless turned the immortal enchained, heaving, dolorous, anguished, unbearable, till a roof, shaggy, wild, enclosed in an orb, his fountain of thought. In a horrible, dreamful slumber, like the linked infernal chain, a vast spine writhed in torment upon the winds, shooting pained ribs like a bending cavern, and bones of solidness froze over all his nerves of joy. And the first age passed over, and a state of dismal woe. From the caverns of his jointed spine, down sunk with affright a red round globe, hot burning, deep, deep down into the abyss, panting, conglobing, trembling, shooting out 10,000 branches around his solid bones. And a second age passed over, and a state of dismal woe. With harrowing fear rolling around, his nervous brain shot branches round the branches of his heart, on high into two little orbs, and fixed in two little caves, hiding carefully from the wind. His eyes beheld the deep. And a third age passed over, and a state of dismal woe. The pangs of hope began. In heavy pain, striving, struggling, two ears in close volutions from beneath his orbs of vision shot spiring out and petrified as they grew, and a fourth age passed, and a state of dismal woe. In ghastly torment sick, hanging upon the wind, two nostrils bent down to the deep, and a fifth age passed over, and a state of dismal woe. In ghastly torment sick within his ribs, bloated round, a craving, hungry cavern. Thence arose his channeled throat, and like a red flame, a tongue of thirst and hunger appeared. And a sixth age passed over, and a state of dismal woe. Enraged and stifled with torment, he threw his right arm to the north, his left arm to the south, shooting out in anguish deep, and his feet stamped the nether abyss in trembling and howling in dismay, and a seventh age passed over, and a state of dismal woe. In terrors, Los shrunk from his task. His great hammer fell from his hand. His fires beheld, and sickening, hid their strong limbs in smoke, or with noises, ruinous, loud, with hurtlings and clashings and groans. The immortal endured his chains, though bound in a deadly sleep. All the myriads of eternity, all the wisdom and joy of life, roll like a sea around him, except that his little orbs of sight, by degrees, unfold. And now, his eternal life, like a dream, was obliterated. Shuddering, the eternal prophet smote with a stroke from his north to south region. The bellows and hammer are silent now. A nerveless silence. His prophetic voice seized, a cold solitude and dark void. The eternal prophet and Urizen closed. Ages on ages rolled over them, cut off from life and light, frozen into horrible forms of deformity. Los suffered his fires to decay. Then he looked back with anxious desire, but the space undivided by existence struck horror into his soul. Los wept, obscured with mourning, his bosom earthquaked with sighs. He saw Urizen, deadly black, in his chains bound, and pity began. In anguish, dividing and dividing, for pity divides the soul. In pangs, eternity on eternity, life in cataracts poured down his cliffs. The void shrunk the lymph into nerves, wandering wide on the bosom of the night, and left a round globe of blood, trembling upon the void. Thus, the eternal prophet was divided before the death image of Urizen. For in changeable clouds and darkness, in a winterly night beneath, the abyss of Los stretched immense, and now seen, now obscured, to the eyes of eternals the visions remote of the dark separation appeared. As glasses discover worlds in the endless abyss of space, so the expanding eyes of immortals beheld the dark visions of Los, and the globe of lifeblood trembling. The globe of lifeblood trembled, branching out into roots, fibrous, writhing upon the winds, fibers of blood, milk, and tears, in pangs, eternity on eternity, at length in tears and cries embodied a female form, trembling and pale, waves before his deathy face. All eternity shuddered at sight of the first female, now separate, pale as a cloud of snow, waving before the face of Los. Wonder, awe, fear, astonishment petrify the eternal myriads at the first female form, now separate. They called her pity and fled. Spread a tent with strong curtains around them. Let cords and stakes bind in the void, that eternals may no more behold them. They began to weave curtains of darkness. They erected large pillars round the void, with golden hooks fastened in the pillars. With infinite labor, the eternals a roof wove, and called it science.
But Los saw the female and pitied. He embraced her. She wept. She refused. In perverse and cruel delight, she fled from his arms. Yet he followed. Eternity shuddered when they saw man begetting his likeness on his own divided image. A time passed over. The Eternals began to erect the tent when Enitharmon, sick, felt a worm within her womb. Yet helpless it lay like a worm in the trembling womb to be molded into existence. All day the worm lay on her bosom. All night within her womb the worm lay, till it grew to a serpent, with dolorous hissings and poisons round Enitharmon's loins folded. Coiled within Enitharmon's womb the serpent grew, casting its scales with sharp pangs. The hissings began to change to a grating cry. Many sorrows and dismal throes, many forms of fish, bird, and beast, brought forth an infant form where there was a worm before. The Eternals their tent finished, alarmed with these gloomy visions, when Enitharmon, groaning, produced a man-child to the light. A shriek ran through eternity, and a paralytic stroke at the birth of the human shadow, delving earth in his resistless way, howling. The child with fierce flames issued from Enitharmon. The Eternals closed the tent. They beat down the stakes, the cords stretched for a work of eternity. No more Los beheld eternity. In his hands he seized the infant. He bathed him in springs of sorrow. He gave him to Enitharmon. They named the child Orc. He grew, fed with milk of Enitharmon. Los awoke her. O sorrow and pain! A tightening girdle grew around his bosom. In sobbings he burst the girdle in twain, but still another girdle oppressed his bosom. In sobbings again he burst it. Again another girdle succeeds. The girdle was formed by day, by night was burst in twain. These, falling down on the rock, into an iron chain, in each other, link by link locked. They took Orc to the top of a mountain. Oh, how Enitharmon wept! They chained his young limbs to the rock with the chain of jealousy, beneath Urizen's deathful shadow. The dead heard the voice of the child, and began to awake from sleep. All things heard the voice of the child, and began to awake to life. And Urizen, craving with hunger, stung with the odors of nature, explored his dens around. He formed a line and a plummet to divide the abyss beneath. He formed a dividing rule. He formed scales to weigh. He formed massy weights. He formed a brazen quadrant. He formed golden compasses and began to explore the abyss. And he planted a garden of fruits. But Los encircled Enitharmon with fires of prophecy from the sight of Urizen and Orc. And she bore an enormous race. Urizen explored his dens, mountain, moor, and wilderness, with a globe of fire lighting his journey, a fearful journey, annoyed by cruel enormities, forms of life on his forsaken mountains. And his world teemed vast enormities, frightening, faithless, fawning portions of life, similitudes of a foot, or a hand, or a head, or a heart, or an eye. They swam, mischievous, dread terrors, delighting in blood. most Urizen sickened to see his eternal creations appear, sons and daughters of sorrow, on mountains weeping and wailing. First, Theriel appeared, astonished at his own existence, like a man from a cloud born. And Utha, from the waters emerging, laments. Grodna rent the deep earth, howling, amazed, his heavens immense cracks like the ground parched with heat. Then Fuzan flamed out, first begotten, last born. All his eternal sons in like manner, his daughters, from green herbs and cattle, from monsters and worms of the pit. He, in darkness closed, viewed all his race, and his soul sickened. He cursed both sons and daughters, for he saw that no flesh nor spirit could keep his iron laws one moment. For he saw that life lived upon death. The ox in the slaughterhouse moans, the dog at the wintry door, and he wept, and he called it pity. And his tears flowed down on the winds. Cold he wandered on high over their cities, in weeping and pain and woe, and wherever he wandered in sorrows upon the aged heavens, a cold shadow followed behind him, like a spider's web, moist, cold, and dim, drawing out from his sorrowing soul the dungeon-like heaven dividing, wherever the footsteps of Urizen walked over the cities in sorrow, till a web, dark and cold, throughout all the tormented elements stretched from the sorrows of Urizen's soul, and the web is a female in embryo. None could break the web, no wings of fire, so twisted the cords and so knotted the meshes, twisted like to the human brain. And all called it the net of religion. Then the inhabitants of those cities felt their nerves change into marrow, and hardening bones began, and swift diseases and torments, and throbbings and shootings and grindings through all the coasts, till weakened the senses inward rushed, shrinking beneath the dark net of infection, till the shrunken eyes, clouded over, discerned not the woven hypocrisy, but the streaky slime in their heavens, brought together by narrowing perceptions, appeared transparent air, for their eyes grew small, like the eyes of a man, and in reptile forms shrinking together, of 7 feet stature they remained. 6 days they shrunk up from existence, and on the 7th day they rested, and they blessed the 7th day in sick hope, and forgot their eternal life. And their 30 cities divided in form of a human heart. No more could they rise at will in the infinite void, but bound down to earth by their narrowing perceptions, they lived a period of years, then left a noisome body to the jaws of devouring darkness. And their children wept, and built tombs on the desolate places, and formed laws of prudence, and called them the eternal laws of God. And the 30 cities remained, surrounded by salt floods, now called Africa. Its name was then Egypt. The remaining sons of Urizen beheld their brethren shrink together beneath the net of Urizen. Persuasion was in vain, for the ears of the inhabitants were withered and deafened and cold, and their eyes could not discern their brethren of other cities. So Fuzan called all together the remaining children of Urizen, and they left the pendulous earth. They called it Egypt and left it. And the salt ocean